let me talk to you about Detroit is Different, the community group. The community group is the project effort where we're going to be doing the Alaa Studio project for outdoor podcasting, the gardening, and the performance. Make sure you give like everybody else that's given so far to this great campaign. We got $885. I want to get to $2,500. I got faith we'll get there with your support so we can stay creative, keep this thing in the summer, keep this thing outside, and keep this thing going. Detroit is different. It's educational, informational, and also entertainment. Remember, when you give to Detroit is Different community group, you're giving to a neighborhood, you're giving to yourself, and you're giving to the platform for Black voices to truly express what's on our hearts and minds. So give today to the Detroit is Different community group through PayPal or Cash App. And make sure that you're supporting because Detroit is different. All right, back in the Detroit is Different podcast studios. Today's guest is someone I've had on once before, I believe, where we told a little bit of the story, but not the full story. This is definitely somebody that's known me my whole life. This is definitely like the framework of most of what I do, how I engage in life. As people say, you got two halves to everything. And the half of my life, my dad, Frazier CPA. How are you, Dad?
I'm doing great, son. How are you?
Good. This is unique because I remember the first time, rest in peace to my mom, your wife. The first time we did this, my mom was like, this should be like this and this should be like that. And why did he wear this? And why did he? She was more instrumental in all of this Detroit is Different story. But since then, since her passing and so much has happened, but just the seed that was planted and what has become a Detroit is Different. And I'm sure from above and everything, a lot is still, part of the Detroit is Different story is the Jan Frazier story. And without Jan Frazier, you have no Kari Frazier.
Right.
And definitely our connection is not what exists.
And in so many ways, I mean, your mother, my wife, I mean, she made me so much of who I am today. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, I don't know if she would approve of, I can hear her now, Greg, mm-hmm. you should shave, Greg. Why don't you wear a white shirt, or maybe a suit, you're still a CPA, Greg, you're a CPA, So
she
I can
definitely
see that.
Would say that.
Oh, I know she would, man. But I do know this. She, along with our other ancestors, are very proud of you and what you're accomplishing here. I mean,
Thank you.
And so am I. I mean, this is phenomenal, son. We really love you for this,
Thank you. And telling these stories, a lot of my Detroit stories have been curated from that foundation of you all as parents and even in this house, Mother Dear's house, and so much of that extension, Clements, it all starts there. But let's start this whole story as many people don't know this. This is part of my story in history. Your connection to Detroit. How did it all start? How did you end up in Detroit?
Okay. Well, for me, it was pursuit of the traditional dream that brothers and sisters have when they graduate from high school and then they go into college, and then basically, you dream of the quote unquote good job. And in my case, I mean, this is going back to my years at the University of Cincinnati. The good job for me was an opportunity to come and work for General Motors. At that time, and we're talking about, I started working at the Cadillac division of General Motors back in 1979. Mm-hmm. So I've been around for a while. And back then, Detroit has really helped me to grow in a consciousness that, I frankly, along with being part of the family here, my wife's, your mother's family, it's helped me to grow with the consciousness that's helped me out in life. And I think Detroit has played a major role in that as well. Not to say that I weren't with some conscious brothers in Cincinnati, mm-hmm. but Detroit actually, it helped. But at that time, in 1979, the dream for me was to have the traditional corner office with at some point with a nice, sexy secretary, and to work as a computer programmer, and then eventually some kind of manager in IT or information technology or information systems back there in the 79 and the early 80s.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit before then. Your parents, or my grandparents,
Right.
what's their story? How did they meet? What's that connection there in Cincy?
Okay, all right. Like a lot of black families, there are, you can almost say that we're not monolithic. So the travels in our lives are different. You and your sister have been blessed with, in my opinion, to be able to see the different aspects of different families. And what I mean by that, I'll cut right to the chase. To me, the Rulak family is that's a well-known, powerful family. I mean, they were even quoted in this the book Our Kind of People and all that. I mean, that Rulak family, not saying that they were super wealthy and all that, but they were well-known, judges and lawyers and all of that. Okay, that said, that's one aspect, and that's the family that your mother and you and your sister come from. That's the family I married into. The other side of that would be, we'll call it the Frazier family. But the Frazier family, the names of Bogan and Chandler come into play. My mother met my father in Cincinnati, and for lack of a better description, my family is more like the family from the other side of the tracks, right? And she was let me start out this way, to really tell the full story. And these are things I've shared with you, and I don't mind sharing it with the public. And that is my grandmother for years kind of kept it a secret that the family that the man that my grandmother was married to was not the mother of, or was not the father of my mother. So years passed, but if you look at the photographs, you can clearly see that my mother was much darker than the rest of her siblings. And at a certain point, I'm sure that kind of rocked the family a bit. I'm sure it caused some turmoil. At a certain point in time, I'm sure that the husband would say, wait a minute, this is, there's something that doesn't add up here. And I think, and understand, it's hard to get this information out of your grandmother, but as she's opening up more, I mean, your grandmother's 91 years old now. But she's opening it up more, and pretty much has opened up, I think, the full story. And just one day, your great-grandmother just looked at your mother as a teenager and said, you know what? How would you like to meet your father? And that initial statement was confusing to even my mother, that what are you talking about? Anyway, this is in Little Rock, Arkansas. And they rode over to what we would still call, what she refers to as the other side of town, the other side of the tracks, and met your great-grandfather, my grandfather, which is, his name is Henry Bowman. But your grandmother's name is Lucille Bogan, okay? And that was obviously a shock to your mother as a teenager. I mean, to your grandmother as a teenager. So I think that contributed to her being a bit of rebellious and a bit of not wanting to take any stuff from anybody anytime soon. And you know the kind of character that she is, the kind of personality she has.
I sure do.
Right.
To this day.
So to this day, even at 91 years old. Yeah. So, and I also think that kind of gave her a somewhat tainted perspective of men, just in general. So when she at a young age, as soon as she got out of high school, she left Little Rock, Arkansas, and she was living it up, man. She went to Kansas City, Kansas, And at that time, it was a popular place for black folks to go because it was a hot party spot. It was a place where I guess brothers could get jobs, sisters could get jobs. People were hiring there, but it was a lot of action there. For lack of a better description, I mean, your mother your grandmother wanted to enjoy life. So she and her friends, I mean, they partied a lot. She worked jobs, but they partied a lot. Mm-hmm. She met a man who his name is Charles Frazier, and he was infatuated by her, and she liked him a lot, and enough to marry him. She was a few years younger than he was, but she liked, not only was he tall and handsome, but he was also very personable, very charismatic. Initially, that was the way he was. But as time passed, he became he was very jealous, very possessive, to the point where he was physically abusive. There was one time where even where your grandmother tells a story of how in front of her friends, they were all in a car, and she got out the car. And this was back when it was just becoming popular to have the cars without the tops and drawing the blank.
Yeah, the drop tops.
Drop top, yeah, where you wouldn't have, so her friend's in the car and he says something like, where you been? Anyway, she said something smart back to him, like as she had every right to do. He hit her so hard, man, he knocked her out of her shoes. Knocked her on the ground out of her shoes in front of her friends, He was that much of a nutcase, right? Even to the point where, and after he did that, my mother, and your grandmother and her mother, your great grandmother and my grandmother, they said, we can't stay here, and we're going to move. We're going to get out of here. Anyway, they left. Wait a minute, I'm backing up. My mother left Kansas City and went back to Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Charles Frazier was from Arkansas too. He had family in Arkansas. He left Kansas and came back to Arkansas looking for her. His family in Arkansas warned my grandmother and mother, y'all got to get it. Y'all got to leave here. Y'all can't stay here because he is crazy, right? So about that time, I guess somehow my grandmother reached out to my grandfather, who had moved to Cincinnati, who had actually came out of the service, while his family was in Arkansas and he grew up in Arkansas. Coming out of the service, he went to Cincinnati to work for the Cincinnati Millicron steel machine. This is a steel company, company that made fabricated steel for the auto industry. He actually lined her up with an opportunity, your grandmother, to become a nurse, which was really a prestigious thing at that time.
Yeah.
But to cut right to the chase, literally when my grandfather took her in and made provisions for her in Cincinnati, Charles Frazier was going to follow her to Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that was the threat, to follow her to Cincinnati. My mother didn't really take the opportunity that my grandfather had offered to her, because she was still young. She was still doing her thing. To this day, the thing that stopped Charles Frazier from, I think, wanting to reestablish this abusive relationship, to cut right to the chase, is that, she basically ran into somebody crazier than him. Mm-hmm. And that was my father, your grandfather, Don Scott. Uh-huh. Don Scott met her in Cincinnati. She, the way he tells the story is, she wrote him a letter. They met through bowling. Bowling was a real popular thing. It's less popular with black folks. I guess it's less popular in America right now. Yeah. But back then, during the 50s, man, that was the big deal. 40s and 50s, bowling was what was happening. Bowling and partying and drinking beer and then partying some more. That was what was going on. So, and your grandfather was an outstanding bowler.
Yeah,
very competitive.
My grandfather, your father, was extremely competitive. I mean, he was inducted into the Bowling Hall of Fame.
That's right. Don Scott,
one of the first black professional bowlers. Period.
Yep. Right. That's right. As a matter of fact, what we'll do is we'll refer him as Don Scott. My mother will refer to her as Emma Jean, so we'll keep it in sync like that. Your great-grandmother would be Lucille. Mm-hmm. So she got with him, and I guess word got back to Frazier to basically back off. I don't know how that went down. I'm improvising here because I don't have the full story there. All I know is the pursuit from him stopped once she got with your grandfather. Yeah. Right? Now, that said, I mean, your grandfather was not a saint. You know, he was a nice guy. He was wonderful to her. Mm-hmm. You know, he respected her. He really loved her a lot. Mm-hmm. Okay. But, you know, he was also into some criminal stuff. Mm-hmm. All right. So what he was involved in was a interstate car theft ring is where he got in trouble. But your grandfather, extremely smart, very smart guy. As a matter of fact, when the FBI when they were looking for him, and they paid a visit to your grandmother, to Emma Jean, and in an interview, and this is when she was pregnant with me, and they were looking for him. They told her that you know, this guy has an IQ of 165, so he's. You know, so that was something that, you know, she said, well, he is pretty smart. And incidentally, you know, Emma Jean is pretty smart too. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he wasn't smart enough to not get caught. Yeah.
But also, as we always say, even in the opportunities, as I call it, you know, crime or the street economy, exists in the black community, as there are not as many opportunities afforded to us as black people, especially black men at that time and even in times today. So what we look at as legal and illegal, especially in the premise of America, being that America is everything about America is from something immoral and illegal.
That's right.
Under what American laws are today. It's always kind of like pot calling the kettle of anyone into what I call street life, depending upon where your moral compass is and who, quote unquote, it harms. If it's, I look at something like that through insurance agencies and things like that, that is as we call it, victimless crime. Mm-hmm. If the victim is the bank, corporations, entities where that are already connected to this structure of white supremacy that limits opportunities for black people already. Mm-hmm. I think that the crimes where you do have victims, like the sickness of something like Charles Frazier attacking my grandmother, that right there, that's where the morality and the crime and the legality need to line up, where that man needs to be taken away. Right. But then I think about the savviness of my grandfather making an opportunity. I don't see that the same way.
Well, yeah, and we both know the story. I mean, your grandfather, fast forward, and then we'll bounce back and kind of wrap that part of it up. He became a very prominent businessman in Cleveland.
Very much so.
I mean, to the point where he could have an audience with the governor. The governor would be calling him. You know, I think the governor and his family, along with, we'll call it our Cleveland family, they went to Africa together, you know. But that road to get there, I mean, it was not only you know, people say, oh, it was hard work, but no, it's because your grandfather was smart as hell, right? Mm-hmm. But back then, he did get caught, and he was he served his time. And before I even get into what happened while he was in prison, just some of the stories that he would tell me, and I'm sure he shared these stories with you. It was the stories of how he obtained his first nightclub, you know, in Cleveland. I'm sure he talked about that. That's one of the stories that he doesn't like to tell that your grandmother tells, is when they were in Blue Ash, Ohio. And this is an outskirts of, I guess it's really closer to Cincinnati as opposed to Cleveland. Your folks were in a fight Blue Ash was kind of like sort of like a farm town. You know, a lot of farmland. This is going back this is back in the late 50s, I guess. And during that, these guys were drinking and fighting, and it was a lot of ruckus down the street. And it was disturbing the relatives of, and I guess they would have been the equivalent of your great aunt and uncle and my mother and and Don, your grandfather. They were staying, visiting the family. That was a way to get out of the inner city and to get away and to get into some farmland, fresh air, to get out of all the chaos of the city. But during that fight, but these folks were fighting and drinking down the street. So your mother tells a story of how she first really began to understand the mind of Don and how Don is the nicest guy in the world around her. Nicest guy, you met him. How Don is. Ego is big as hell, but, nice guy, right? And he went down there and basically took out his pistol. And told him, I don't know where you niggas are going to go, but y'all got to leave from around here, And he said it in such a tone where everybody around him knew that, that was the message. That was
time to leave.
Time to leave.
Yeah.
Then when he came back to your grandmother, and she said, "What happened? What did you do?" He said, "I don't know. I just talked to him, But as he was saying that, she could see that the pistol that he had was on his leg, his little leg holster or whatever.
Sometimes those are conversations that my granddad may have with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And even in Cincinnati, what your grandfather, since he was really great at bowling, great bowler, he knew the bowling business. He began to learn the whole business of bowling.
Yeah, he ran a couple bowling alleys himself.
He did. But prior to that, and he probably should have had these bowling alleys when he was much, much younger. But because of, in my opinion, your opinion, we know the story, systemic racism, guys with minds like that didn't have an opportunity to do the things that they could have been doing.
True.
So they have to work around and deal with what they have. What he made a commitment to one of the Jewish owners of one of the bowling alleys there in Cincinnati, who had a competitor down the street. He said, "If you let me manage this bowling alley, I'll pretty much double the people that come in here. I'm going to increase your patrons to come into this bowling alley."
Yeah.
And so the owner of the bowling alley, said, "Okay, we'll do that." He basically turned over management to your grandfather. Now the story has it, and this is a story that your grandfather didn't tell me. This is a story that your grandmother told me, was that within a few weeks after he started managing the bowling alley down the street had a really bad fire to the point where they had to move. Patrons doubled.
Yeah.
So
now, hey, like we say, I don't know what's in what and how things go, but my grandfather was very cunning, savvy, smart, brilliant. When I think about before he passed and as time went, and I'm kind of fast forwarding the story just due to at the time, the rift of his presence in your life. At one point in time, I think I probably had a closer relationship with my grandfather than you had with your father. So, but with it, I kind of want to get back to your Detroit story in this too. But he was very savvy. I think every one of his business deals, he looked at racism as it's going to be a part of the business.
That's right.
And that's what was so unique, and it almost gives me like my matter-of-fact attitude towards like this is just how things are. So it would be things like let's say like a new club opens up in downtown Cleveland, and they want to open up on the docks where it's predominantly white clubs around Cleveland. Granddad would approach some of the old Italian and Jewish club owners and say, "Hey, I'm running out of business. I'm running out of money because, this new club's about to open up. I mean, what could, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen to compete." And he just knew that the racism of the Jewish and Italian club owners was like, we do not need black people in and around downtown Cleveland over here that's segmented off of white Cleveland. So let's go on and give Scott, my grandfather, Don Scott, let's go on and put a package together of thousands of dollars so he can run the radio promo, maybe add to his club so they want to go back to the neighborhood that's segmented for black people. He would use this type of business savvy all the time. Like, it's almost like he looked at every business decision he made as like, okay, I know this is what white people want for black people. So what are the competitive advantages knowing that they have this blind spot so focused on racism of not wanting to be around black people or not wanting to empower black people? How can I present myself as the black person that already understands this system, but pull and extrapolate all the resources I need from them? It's like, you know, I'll go sometimes to Cleveland and I can look at the notes because my grandmother, Grandma Vale, his wife, like, she still keeps a lot of his business notes. Uncle D, your brother, my Uncle Don D. Scott, sometimes I'll look at this stuff too. And like, just his notes about like, they will want, it's like you see the advantage of the blindness and commitment of white people and white supremacy wanting to exist in this space and say, I can exploit this, because they're so committed to it, they will lose money in effect to just not be around black people or not to offer a black person somewhat of a competitive advantage. Every business deal, it seems like he functioned with this in mind. It's, as some people would say, like, this is cruel, but it's genius in the same distorted reality of being a black man doing business in America.
That's right. And actually, that's interesting you bring that up. A lot of the other cultures, and you mentioned the Italians and the Jews, and it was the Jewish people. It was his interactions with the Italians in Cleveland that led to his involvement with the interstate car theft ring. And it was that same relationship with the Italians that actually kept Don King, you know, the boxing promoter, alive. Yeah. Because Don King back then was a numbers man. You know, he was running numbers. And Don King did something really stupid. He reneged or cheated or did something with the money as far as numbers. Yeah. And they were going to take him out. Yeah. The only reason they didn't take him out is because Don Scott spoke in his behalf. Don Scott kept Don King alive.
And many others. I mean, George Floyd, if you're a black business person, Mr. Oliver Ragsdale that connects here through the car center, like, if you're a black business person that was associated with any form of business, I would say probably from the 80s, well, really maybe the 70s, 80s, 90s, you would have had to connect with my grandfather kind of to function in any form of doing business, because it was just like that. Like, you know, so when people ask me about how do I come up with these creative ideas and what it is, that premise kind of comes from my grandfather and then a lot in you. So let's kind of get back to your Detroit story.
Well, I want to tell one story. We'll do that. One story, because this really kind of crystallizes, I think, a lot of the concept of your grandfather, the way he thought. Yeah. A kind of judo to operate, given that you do have systemic racism out here, given that it is what it is, as you pointed out. It's almost like, how do you use that? How do you look for those opportunities to actually use the sickness of that to your advantage? And it was during I guess it would have been the 60s when folks started rioting, when it became, quote unquote, a very dangerous place, or somewhat dangerous place for white folks to be in parts of Cleveland. And that's how your grandfather obtained that nightclub, you know, the Red Carpet Lounge on Euclid Avenue in Cleveland. The problem he didn't have any parking. Meanwhile, this owner, a Jewish guy across the street, had all this space. He fenced off, you know, all this potential parking space fenced off, right? Had it fenced off. Don talked to him, negotiated with him, and said, "Look, if I can't buy the property, at least let me pay you a fee to use it.
Let me rent it."
He wouldn't budge, because I don't know what his plans were, but he wouldn't. I don't know what the Jewish guy was thinking, but he wouldn't budge.
He just don't want to do business with black folks.
And it could be that he may have wanted. Who knows? May have wanted to squeeze him out of the club. You know, whatever. Who knows what the story is? But here's the way the story ended. Your grandfather pulled that fence up. He and his folks, his thug friends or whatever, they dumped that fence on that guy's front lawn. He got the message, and he made a deal with your father, with your grandfather after that.
Yeah.
And that was an example of just, that's one example.
You have to know when to play what game, but as much as sometimes it was street, my grandfather, so as we talk about stories of my grandfather, this is so funny. So on our visits to Cleveland when we were kids, because my granddad is old school, he's traditional. So he would take my sister, would go like spend the day with Grandma Vale, so they like go to the mall and go shopping, and it's like, man, that'd be fun. And he's like, the boy coming with me, and it's like, man, what are we about to do? I usually would sit. So a couple of those trips, I sat in arbitration after arbitration after arbitration after arbitration. So I'm like, you can imagine the mind of 11-year-old Kari Frazier. So you wonder how I'm thinking like I'm thinking now, because I'm 11 sitting in arbitration after arbitration, because it's like the boy coming with me. So if you don't know what arbitration is, it's basically like a step before what would become a legal case. And we sit and I would sit with his attorney. I would sit with his CPA, and he would just orchestrate how we were going to deal with this. And I would watch people, because he owned a nightclub. So, different people coming in with neck braces, people coming in with in wheelchairs, people coming in with crutches. It's like he almost like set certain days out the week. This is the day I'm dealing with lawsuits.
Yep. I remember.
And I would watch the way he engaged and interacted with his attorney, and I'm thinking to myself, like, damn, you, like you can, you know what I'm saying? Because the 11-year-old me is still thinking court is a whole lot more like, Law and Order or something, like the premise of like, if you need to talk to your attorney, it's like you almost kind of need some legal information, and it's like, granddad, it's like, look, I ain't paying that nigga shit. I'll pay you 3 times as much as what he wants to not pay him shit. Right. And I had to pull him to the side one time. I was like, okay, all right, why wouldn't you do that? He was like, look, this is how it goes. Because sometimes, grandson, you're going to learn that if word gets out here that I'm the guy that you can sue, everybody gonna sue me. So, and he's like, but we still gonna look out for the family though, because I know he got some kids, so we gonna make sure that that's taken care of, and your grandma probably gonna worry about all of that. So in the same way of like, I'm not about to let you exploit me. I recognize this slip and fall, but you're not about to call 1-800, get rid of Don Scott's nightclub. We're going to make sure your family's taken care of, but you're not about to exploit me either. This is like the nuances, as you say, of like how to conduct and even stay and even build and develop that social capital. As it's unique. And, at 11, it's like, I would rather have done something else. But now, at my age now, it's like, oh, this is how you can still function. This is how you can be under pressure. And you've been in some of these same moments too. This is how you can function in under pressure. And really back to, like you say, it's the judo of using that against you by being the person in the hood, dealing with people that most people wouldn't want to be with, dealing with the black customer and clientele that certain people would turn away and walk away from. The competitive advantage is you have a freedom to be more creative working within this stance, because I guarantee if Granddad had that club down, off the docks, next to like some of the more premier white clubs and stuff like that, then probably some of those white clubs would have paid the attorney for the people to sue him.
Oh yeah,
would have sent people in there too.
He was smart enough to know he probably wouldn't have. That wouldn't have been a sustainable enterprise down there.
Yeah.
What's interesting is he is, in so many ways that magnanimous side. But now I'm going to get into the side where you mentioned. Let's face it. For a while, I hated my father. Right.
Yeah.
And that story is while he was in federal penitentiary, the letters that he wrote to your grandmother, you could see that he was vulnerable. I mean, he called her Little Puddin'. Little Puddin' is what he called her, and he missed her and all of that. Meanwhile, your grandmother had understand to me the way women thought back then, because right now you have a lot of women are very independent, and I don't know how much time. I don't know. Are we cutting in on a lot of time, or
No, I mean we can keep going. I want to get to the Detroit story. We're like 30 minutes in, but this is interesting, so continue.
He, her thoughts were, and I can, you know, I can.
We can't get into the full ideology, but my grandmother moved on.
She moved on. She basically met
another
guy
man
who was, to me, very much the opposite of Don Scott. Very
so.
Successful real estate businessman. Big time Republican, so light skinned, you know, he could pass for white. You know, you've seen George. And, you know, George has since passed away, like most of these people we're talking about, except for your grandmother. And basically she had a daughter, my sister, you know, your Aunt Darla.
Darla. Yep. And
that devastated your grandfather.
Like many men would be.
Like, yeah, he's in prison and he's in love with her, and he's writing these letters about their plans, what they're going to do and get married, and she's, you know, she's got a second child by another man, right?
Yeah.
Basically, when he came out of prison, I don't know if they even had if they even spoke to each other, because from there he went to Cleveland.
Yep.
And then your grandmother stayed in Cincinnati. And he met Val. He met our Cleveland family, and that began to establish our Cleveland family. You know, your sister Avis, and and
your
D,
sister Avis,
my
Aunt
sister,
Avis,
your Aunt Avis,
my
your Uncle D,
cousins Kenya, Kayla,
right. When I was 6 years old, he came to pay me a visit. I had never seen my father up until that point. I mean, even, you know, when I was born, I mean, he was in prison. So 6 years old, I'm excited to see him. He and Vel, they come, you know, his wife now. He had actually, this was after they did a feature story on him as a successful businessman and a bowler in Ebony magazine, which the magazine not around anymore, but it was a feature story. So I'm like, man, I'm ready to meet this guy that, you know, my father, who's in this magazine too, you know, and then they came. My father came to our little home, and this was on Alaska Avenue, and in Cincinnati. And while he took me in the other room to ask me things like, you know, hey, what do you want to do? What do you see yourself doing? And I told him, and I showed him some things where I had a microscope, and I was showing him the microscope thing. Never seen my father before. This is the first time he saw me. Meanwhile, and I know Vel didn't like to talk about this, and neither does your grandmother. Neither of your grandmothers like talking about it.
And because of that, and I don't even really want to go so deep, but it was not. They didn't come to an agreement.
Right. There was.
Let's just say that it was a back and forth.
They were moving a lot of furniture in the other room.
A lot of back and forth.
Right.
Yes.
And I think in a nutshell, I think the argument was, you know, basically, I think she was accusing Emma Jean, your grandmother in Cincinnati, of, you know, shaking them down for money. You know? And you know, so there was a lot of back and forth there. Meanwhile, your grandfather appeared to be above the fray by just being with me. And I never forget, he promised me. He says, what do you want? You got a microscope. I said, I want a telescope. I want a telescope, Dad. And I felt weird saying that, but he was my father, you know. So I'm going to get you a telescope, right? But later on, I found out that what they had come to do, they wanted to take me back to Cleveland.
Yeah.
And my mother, later on, she asked me after they had left, well, do you want to go and live with your father? And she told me, because I don't remember this at all, but she said, you said you did not want to go, that you want to stay with me. Which makes sense. A son wanting to, you know, this is the person I've been with. I grew up with.
You didn't
I don't know
have
anything
a frame of reference.
I don't know anything about Don Scott, right? But what he said to her, and I don't know if it was by phone, it must have been by phone because they had left. If I can't take him back to Cleveland, I don't want to have anything to do with that knot-headed nigga. She told me that. She said, I just want you to know the truth. Because she never spoke bad about Don. She always tried to be truthful, right? She actually praised him more with the stories. Because, you know, it's plenty to talk about. But that hurt.
I can imagine.
Man. You know, at 6 years old with all the other things I had in my mind about. But what really hurt worse, he kept his word on that. He didn't do anything. Ever. So when I came here to Detroit and I met your mother, one of the reasons why your mother is really like an angel of a person coming here, I had nothing to do with my father. Nothing. And she knew that. The times that she would bring it up, well, what about your father, Greg? And, I don't know what I would. She got the reading and the message that he don't want to have anything to do with his father. Mm-hmm. But she also had, well, let me just say it this way. The next thing I knew, one day out of the blue, she calls me on the phone. And you and your sister and Janella, they're in Cleveland with my father. Because that was your first time meeting your grandfather. But when I came here to Detroit, coming out of college, understand as a black man what, there are different things that drive us. I think Janella and I, we raised you and your sister where ideally strong family values, and just knowing that you're coming from a nurturing spot.
And wait. When you say Janella and I'm going to say, I think my mom had, if this is like a team, my mom was like Michael Jordan of the family dynamic.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
You were way more
As
like.
As a matter of fact, let's keep it real. You're right. Let's keep it real.
She was way more.
I don't want to let me not sugarcoat my role, because that wasn't my. She was definitely the Michael Jordan. Yes. She was definitely the LeBron James. I was like. Pippin at best.
Yes.
At best,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
And and it's amazing how that's a different kind of strength that your mother brought. She wasn't bombastic or anything like that.
No.
She just had a quiet force, man. She would just, the stuff that she would do, you said, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. Bam, you end up doing it, She was powerful like that and just knew how to do those things. When you guys called me from Cleveland, at first I was angry. But then as I said, you know what, this makes sense. Like that Don Scott there, that's not the same Don Scott that was around when I was a kid, But what that did with me, growing up, I didn't have that nurturing atmosphere, that nurturing thing. You ever heard the song Johnny Cash, Boy Named Sue?
Yeah.
Boy Named Sue, what drove that character? The fact that his father named him Sue was kind of so it was the, people don't like to say the word hatred or bitterness, but it was that actually drove me. That was actually, I'm not saying I was obsessed and it burned in me, but that did cause some issues. But that was sort of like a driving. I would be in scenarios where, like, let's say if I'm selling books or something, I was selling books while I was in college. I'd be in the middle of Augusta, Georgia, someplace selling books. Potentially, like, it's hot as hell. People are slamming doors in my face and all that. And as opposed to tapping into something that would say, man, you got your family behind you, I would tap into something, man, that son of a bitch that was my father, he doesn't think I'm going to be successful. Fuck him, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to close some sales. That was the thing that would drive me. That was the drive that brought me to Detroit. It was, and so you got to understand, in some crazy way, Don Scott, your father, kind of put something in me, like the Boy Named Sue, to like, hey, you're going to succeed because of the way that I treated you.
And then also, as we talk and unpack, this is my family story, your story, my family story. This is a common black story because that same pattern is the story of my grandfather.
That's true.
In his pain towards his father. And family in general, as my grandfather, Don Scott, grew up, very much like formal education, like stopped very early and much on his own. Like I can parallel, like I say, like James Brown almost to my grandfather. Like he had a, man, I feel we're revealing so much about Don. I feel it's like incriminating, but he had a.
Maybe that's what it was meant to be that way.
He had a. So I guess that would be my great great aunt ran a numbers and brothel, like a street, let's just call it a street establishment of the time. And that's who took after him, because that's the only one in his family he kind of connected to, as his family was broken up at a very young age. And most of the savviness of what he learned in business, the same way James Brown kind of grew up in that brothel street environment. And Richard Pryor grew up in that brothel street environment. My grandfather grew up in that brothel numbers street environment, seeing a black woman engage and interact with men at their most, off-kilter space and sustain something from that. Like, this is, so like these stories of like, what sticks to you, what you see, how you move. I mean, he was really on his own maybe at the age of 13, 14. Which another one of those types of people that like, it's like X, you assume their age is this, but in reality, who knows what my age is, because I kind of been on my own my whole life, but still, like you say, high brilliance. So as we get into your Detroit story, you're here, Cadillac. Right. I often talk about General Motors, as I've highlighted this in another Cincinnati to Detroit guy, the Charlie Beckham story that I had on Detroit is Different. 1979, it's hard to put into perspective what General Motors was to not just America, but the world.
Right.
And definitely Michigan. General Motors, like the way that everyone thinks of what Amazon is now, multiply that times 5.
Yep.
That's how big General Motors was. General Motors was so big that world leaders would come to Detroit to meet at General Motors before they would go to the White House. Sometimes presidents would have to, like a Gerald Ford would have to come to Detroit to meet with, like some world leader from, God knows where, because that's how much money General Motors was generating for the nation, for the world. It was it was huge. And you're working in Cadillac. Cadillac is the premier division in cars. It's like, my time at Walsh, which I followed your footsteps. And, if people don't have an idea of like a lot of the foundation of what marketing was built from the idea of the auto industry, but specifically General Motors. The idea is we're going to start you here. We're going to start you with this type of car, meaning like you'll start off with what's like a low-level General Motors car?
I started out with a Buick. I ended up with the Oldsmobile, but I started out with something less than the Oldsmobile.
Yeah, so you start with this, then you move up to this, then you move up to this, then you end up at Cadillac. Like Cadillac was a sign of prominence. Hence, even to today, like black folks in the hood, like especially older guys in the hood, like now I think foreigns are more sexy, but the Cadillac was a sign of like you've made it, success, and you're now working for this. Yeah. What was going on in your mind? Just General Motors, Cadillac division. This is heavy.
Yeah, well, understand. You look at it. You were looking at it from a global perspective, and I'm gonna tie it down to just the perspective of black folks.
Yeah.
If you had a job at any of the auto industries, that was like, hey, you are it. But then to have a job at General Motors, that was, and then to have a white collar job back there in the early 80s, and then I started in 1979, July of 1979. My folks in Cincinnati, that was like, that's just another planet. Because, let's face it, back then, most people didn't go to college, right? And if you did, it wasn't in anything related to like business, IT, and quantitative analysis, which is what, my focus. But IT, computers, that was another world. So for me, it was, again, my dream. And I already talked to you about what I would, to be in like the glass office, the carpeted floors, the working with computers and all of that. That to me was, I was infatuated by that.
Yeah.
And the first few months, I was that infatuation was there.
Yeah, you were a black person climbing the corporate ladder.
And for the long, I remember, and I played the role to a hilt, man. I was not only had suits. I don't know if you even know what wingtip shoes are. I bought wingtip shoes. That's the shoes that old fashioned white guys wear. But it was a lot of wingtip shoes that I noticed. A lot of people at GM. I'm talking about the guys in suits. They wear wingtip shoes. So I bought wingtip shoes. And it was when And it was actually because of General Motors, of course. You know, the cola parties that they would have. That's how I met your mother.
Okay, a cola party, so people don't know, a cost of living adjustment party. So this is
right.
The culture of the auto manufacturers, which at one point the Big Four, American Motor Company as well, and the Romney family. It permeated so much throughout Detroit that people knew when you would get a cost of living adjustment, like people would get raises, and then promoters would throw parties for cola. Like,
that's right.
Cost of living adjustment party. That's where you met my mom.
Yeah. And actually, if you think about it, that was a way where black folks that were making money in the auto companies because of the negotiations of the unions to negotiate a raise in pay, that raise in pay not only hit the blue-collar workers, they extended that to the white-collar workers. Yeah. And that means there was a lot of money that would be proliferating throughout the community. That money would hit the clubs, but also people that would have rent parties and things like that. People that weren't even, maybe not be working at all, or they're working someplace where they can, like, if you could throw a good cola party, you gonna make a lot of money. Yeah. Right, and you're right. It was in the basement of one of the real nice homes, someplace on the west side of Detroit. That's where I met Janella at one of the cola parties, and it was the brothers that I was hanging with at Cadillac that really began to hit me to all these things. You know, because I'm from Cincinnati, so they said I was.
And they kind of looked at you like you were country in the first place.
Yeah, not only looked at me like I was country. They would constantly say, including Janella when I first met her. You sound country, and I'm like, man, I don't sound country, but I remember saying something I don't say now, but every now and then, I would say dang a lot. Dang, dang was something people said in Cincinnati. They still say that, but anyway, what I began to notice at Cadillac, and this is something that is symptomatic of all, I think, black folks in corporate America, and that is, I remember one of the brothers, and I was maybe one out of every five. Anyway, there was only one other brother I could think of that actually had a degree in college degree. A lot of these brothers were smart brothers, but they learned IT, information technology, from being in the service, doing things in the Army, and then I guess getting out and picking up the skills, But Derek, real smart database brother, older than me, was showing me the ropes at Cadillac. I remember Chuck Holmes and some of those other guys. But I remember Derek walking me down the aisle at Cadillac and pointing to those glass windows, those office windows that were, you basically, if you can't envision the office setting, you have cubicles in the center of an office setting, and people sit in the cubicles. I was one of the cubicle sitters, the
like you've seen guys. This in the movie Office Space.
Yeah,
and then also, as people talk about this is another thing in psychology of the way that schools were structured and developed at one point in time to mimic what industry and plant work was like. That's why the bells and a lot of the buildings look similar. If you look at old factories and you look at old schools, they're like hand in hand, like Central High School, even with this advanced like remodeling, it still has the design of like what an old factory would look like. And the psychology of some of the workplace environment was built to want you to see that glass window.
Yes.
The same way that the psychology of most people incarcerated, they create in many prisons, you have a window, but you can't see out of it. So you knew light was coming in, but you can't see out. It's certain ergonomics and spacing that the psychology that it's going to place you in certain places just by being there.
And that psychology, good point, son. That psychology is critical to the functioning of a capitalistic system.
Yeah.
Because they want that thought embedded in your mind. So the Cadillac layout, you had an office for the white collar folks, and that office fit the template that you just described. And I was saying the cubicles in the center, large space for cubicles, and then along the side, where the people with windows were the executives. that had the glass windows. They could see what it was worth, the view, Clark and Michigan. I mean, what kind of view can you have there? But they still had the windows. And then, of course, the higher up or the most powerful executives had the corner offices, right? And then, of course, higher upstairs too, right? And as Derek is walking me down the aisle, what he started saying was, you see that guy in there? There's Dave Weaver, I said, yeah. I said, yeah, I remember he started just like you did. That was a few years ago. And I trained him. And then he would walk further, and I said, Derek Weaver. I said, yeah. I said, he's a pretty smart guy, thinking to myself. Then he walked a little further, and he pointed somebody else out. I said, yeah, so-and-so. Another white guy, Yeah, I remember him coming in. He didn't know anything about computers. I trained him. I got him up to speed where he learned the system. They didn't call it manufacturing then. They call it inventory control system. And so as he's walking, and I'm thinking to myself, damn, why doesn't Derek have a glass office, right? I never met, that was my first eye-opening thing. I'm like, and the other thing is, when I would go to lunch initially, I didn't hang with the brothers, with Derek and Chuck and Phil. It was the young college folks like me coming in. We would go, and there was a hierarchy in the lunchroom. You had the executives would go all the way. It was a place all the way in the back, closed doors, where if you walked in there, it was a setting like going into a fancy restaurant, kind of like being in someplace like the Detroit Athletic Clubs, one of their fancy places where you can eat. You know how they have the carpet and the brick. It would be the equivalent of the brick. But then there was the rest of the white collars. That was kind of the middle of the lunchroom. The food was pretty cool. Not like eating. You could order stuff. You could order your food for lunch in the executive area. The white collar area, it was buffet, but nice food buffet.
Yep.
Then you had a big space for blue collar. The blue collar is where you go and you eat. It was a buffet too. It was noisy. People coming in and out. You could actually hear some of the noise coming from the factory and all of that. And the college guys like me, we would eat in the middle part.
Yeah.
But as I started hanging with the brothers, the Phils, the Dereks, the Chucks, and some of the cute sisters there, they all ate with the blue-collar folks. Not because they had to, it's because they wanted to. Because psychologically, they were more at home with those people. Yeah. And believe it or not, it was more fun. Higher up the hierarchy, I think I ate in the executive lunchroom maybe twice. And man, it was so stiff and uncomfortable to me in there, because it was all about airs. And then, you feel like, damn, I see some other brothers in here, but, not that many, I mean, like maybe 1%,
Yep.
So that began to weigh on me as well. And one day I just asked, Phil, another guy who was also instantly all these guys could bowl, great bowler. I said, yeah, man. I said, why is it that you guys are training these white boys, man? And they get and now you report to them. I seemed like I wouldn't put up with that bullshit, man. I'd be out of here, And I never forget Phil saying to me, yeah, that's what you think now, but you're working at General Motors, man. They pay you well. You get a discount on cars. You got the best health insurance in the world. What happens is you get locked in. What you gonna do once you start having your children, when you get married and you have children, and you see the benefits, and you see the money you make, and you see the discounts, and not to mention, you work for General Motors, man. The people in the neighborhood, your family, they know you work for GM. They would say, you must be out of your mind to leave General Motors. So they lock you in. Your lifestyle, the car notes, the house note, the one to set money aside in college, the health benefits. You want to risk all of that because, you're kind of pissed off about the fact that, some white guy, it's racist as hell, but they would get locked in. And I thought about that. I'm like, man, that right there was effed up. I said, that ain't gonna happen to me, right? And I saw it. I saw the first stages of that happening when one of the guys that we had all started together. I'll never forget. I can't remember this Jewish guy's name or the Italian guy's name, because we would hang and talk about things. Not hang at lunchtime, but just in the cubicles around the coffee machines and stuff like that. But there was a John Fitzpatrick. He came in when we came in. All of us had IT experience. All of us knew how to write code in college. We knew how to write code, man. Fitzpatrick had a liberal arts degree, but the right name, he had the right look. And I'm thinking, he's cool, but he's not going to go too far here. This is information technology. He's not going to be able to, this back then it was computer systems,
Yeah.
But they made an announcement. Art Miller, who was the director of IT at that time, or the director of CS, said, what we're going to do is I'm going to bring in John Fitzpatrick. He's going to take charge of some things, like little projects that involve setting up the Christmas dinners and coordinating the baseball teams and things like that. So he's going to work a little closer with me, and he's going to come in more on the finance side. He's going to do some IT, but he's going to be on the finance side. Basically, they were taking him under their wing to promote him, to prep him to be to move on up, right? And I never forget me and I can't remember this Mike Fisher, that was his name. The guy we were standing outside the elevator, one of the elevators at Cadillac, and Bob Socia, who was one of the white guys moving up. Bob Socia ended up being president of the Chinese or the division of GM, big time division of GM in China, right? Yeah. But he was young just like us back then, right? I never forget his embarrassed look as those elevators closed while Mike Fisher and I were looking at him and John Fitzpatrick. And John Fitzpatrick innocently asked him, what exactly is depreciation? Now, if you're in business school,
especially in wait, and they said we're prepping him for finance.
Yeah,
so it's not like we're prepping him for like blueprints or something like that. But to be a person that's about to move into running something in finance and not know what depreciation is like damn near.
Yeah, they were basically making him. It was a unilateral move up, where man, you don't know these fundamentals that we all learned in college, man. And so the elevators closed, and Mike and I at that time we looked at each other and kind of laughed. But I think both of us were like, "This is fucked up, man." So they're prepping this guy, right? Yeah. I remember getting into an argument with my project leader, and this is when I was ready to leave General Motors. And this is some of your grandfather coming out in me, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
Because I said to him, we're working on a project one day. We were in the men's bathroom, and his name is Leroy Tuttle, Navy man. He didn't have a college degree either, but again, back then it was common for these guys to big, tall guy too, friendly too. I like Leroy, but this time we were, we got into it. I said, you know what, Leroy, I should be a project leader right now. Everything that you know, I know. I can do everything that you do. And there's no reason why I shouldn't be a project leader. I shouldn't have to wait my turn. I remember saying that to him. And he's like, you know what? You don't understand how this place works here, do you? You really don't, I never forget that same guy. When I was, this is the classic, like in the movies, when you're in the toilet, I was on the toilet. This is a different setting. And I heard him talking to another white guy. And he was saying, I can't remember what it was, but it was something derogatory about black folks, And I said, yeah, this is, this just ain't for me, just ain't for me. Right then, Kari, I began to put it together that I'm probably not the kind of guy to work in a setting like this. I can't see myself in this setting.
Okay, so like many people, are you thinking that, okay, this may just be a problem here at General Motors. Maybe if I go to Ford, it's different. Like, what's your thought process? Because sometimes that's what most times people think. People think if I make a switch, maybe it's just this. Or maybe if I transfer to Buick, it'll be different. They hired a black guy. I just read an Ebony about the black guy that's running this division, so it's probably cool over there, because that's usually the response.
I would come home and I was talk to. Let me see. Were we married by then? I guess I can't remember if we. I would talk to Janella, and I would tell her, I'm dissatisfied. I enjoy working there. I like the projects, but I don't like the treatment. I don't like what I perceive coming down the pipeline. I don't want to be another Derek, Phil, or Chuck. I just can't do that, right?
Yeah.
She knew of, and they were very popular then, headhunters, black headhunters. It was
What's a headhunter?
These are companies that recruit people to work at other jobs. If you're working someplace and and they say, hey, if you're interested in something else, we'll find you another job, and they get a percentage if they place you at another job. This black company was called, the name of it was Lou Dot. Lou Dot was a well-known black headhunter company in Detroit at that time, and she lined me up with one of those brothers. I remember talking to him on the phone, and he said, "Well, how would you like to work at? You think about working at Burroughs?" At that time, Burroughs World Headquarters was located in Detroit, and it was, I don't even know if people know what Burroughs is. It's Unisys now. I don't even know if they know what Unisys is.
Yep.
But at that time, a well-known company. They competed with IBM, and back then it was Honeywell and Data Control, companies like that, I said, yeah, I'll talk to him. And you're right, Kari. I was thinking at that time it's the GM environment.
Yeah.
But I learned even after going to Burroughs, because I did quit.
So you switched and went to Burroughs said...
Yeah, switched and went to Burroughs and basically came in at a higher level, more money, right? Not what I would call management level, because I didn't have people reporting to me, but it was a level where I had more independence. But to make a long story short, it was different atmosphere, started out the same way. I met some interesting people there. Like the most influential guy that I met and enjoyed talking with was Charlie Beckham's brother. I think his name was Bill Beckham. Bill Beckham.
Yeah, Bill Beckham.
And I remember Bill Beckham asked me to come and speak to, at that time, they would have this kitchen cabinet group that would meet every month to advise the mayor. And the Mayor Coleman Alexander Young, would actually come in on those groups every now and then. He said, yeah, if you're lucky, you'll probably have a chance to meet the mayor. Yeah. And of course, I didn't. Every time I would go to speak with these guys,
it was not. Yeah, yeah. he didn't miss those days.
But I did meet him once in those turning doors in front of the in front of the Burroughs World Headquarters. He was coming in. I was going out. And he said, "Yeah, how you doing, young man?" He didn't know how I was, so Yeah. But anyway, I left there. When I left there, it was based on a discussion that I had with a brother named Don Williams. I met Don Williams through the Black Data Processing Association. Remember when you and your sister, Janella, would bring you guys to the Black Data Processing Associates meetings at the Urban League? Yep. So it was through Don Williams that I met this guy named Jerome Sheppard. Jerry Sheppard, man. That was my first step out toward being independent, toward being self-employed.
And how did it go?
I was a real punk ass initially, man, because I remember them taking me. You probably won't remember this restaurant. It was called Mr. Mike's on Woodward, near the Chevrolet place. I can't remember.
Yeah, James Martin Chevrolet Buick.
Yeah. There was a real cool restaurant called Mr. Mike's. I met Jerry Sheppard there the first time. And Sheppard was he had on a really cool suit, really looked like a model, but talked just like, to me, a brother from the streets. Yeah. And Don was saying, yeah, Jerry, this is the brother I was telling you about. And then Sheppard was, so you want to come in? That's good, man. You're making a movie, you're going to make more money. But to cut to the chase, I said, yeah, but I don't know what kind of... I'm getting a lot of experience and exposure at Burroughs on things that I'll be able to use in the future, like skills that I'll be able to apply.
Yeah, you're basically saying a lot of what is told to you in the business world. It's like you'll get a lot of experience. This will look good on your resume. You're working with some of the best professionals, best equipment, build on your expertise. Yeah. So you tell him that.
Yeah, I tell him that. And also in the back of my mind, and this guy was smart enough to know, because he's probably done it a lot, I'm also reluctant to, it's a black company. I don't know nothing about black companies. I'm used to working in a corporate environment like General Motors or Burroughs. what's it going to be like stepping out here in Detroit, working with this brother? I don't know what the deal. Will I get my paychecks on time?
Will I be paid?
Will I be paid? You know?
I got a wife. I got kids.
Yeah. So I said to myself, you know what? I said, the three of us went to lunch a couple of times. But then I talked to Janelle and I said, you know what? I'm going to say I want to be an independent contractor and make more money. And I never forget being at lunch and saying that to Jerry, and Don, who was sitting next to Jerry, said, oh, no, Greg, you might not want to do that right away. And I never forget Jerry stopping him, saying, no, man, if you want to be an independent contractor, that's okay. We can work that out, Don. We'll work with him on that, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. That really stepped me into that circle of like no longer being employed at any corporation. I really didn't work any more companies until I became deputy auditor general for the city of Detroit. And you know, that job only lasted like 5 months. You know? But up until that stepped me out into the independent contractor business. And
so much of that, you have a niche with that, and that kind of moves us. I know we're skipping a lot in this story. But I definitely want to make sure we keep this buttoned up for Detroit is Different. But your niche is IT. You are a person. It's a lot of people that say they're computer programmers and are into computer programming, but you actually can code, and you've always been in that world.
Right.
What was it that connected you to this?
Yeah. I'm going to say our ancestors, the Creator. You know, going back to college, when I was first became exposed to computers, I'm sitting in a room in the University of Cincinnati with a bunch of guys that are, it was the business majors and the engineers took the same college coding course together. It was Fortran. Now, I know you don't even know about that coding, but I never forget, I was the only brother in that class. Class of about 40 guys, right? And actually no women. You know, maybe there may have been, but I just recall all guys, all white guys. But I was asking some of the stupidest ass questions that you would ever think of because it was all new to me. But I was like, man, this stuff is something about this I think I'm gonna like, right? Those first few days, those first few weeks, I was asking all them dumb questions. By the end of that term, I was kicking ass in code, man. Kicking ass, right? It almost became like I was addicted to that stuff. I would literally be going to the back in Cincinnati, the two fraternities that would give the best parties were the alphas and then the silly one, the wild one.
You mean the Qs?
And the Qs, right, right. Best parties. So, you know, if you wanted to go and drink and get high, weed and all of that, you party with definitely the Qs. After those parties, man, I could be high. Back then, there were little computer centers, or you could go to a computer center to see if your computer printout, if what you coded, if it came out correctly, right? It might be 2 o'clock. Oh, and they were open 24 hours. It might be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I would leave lit and go to the computer center. And I remember being high, going in there, and incidentally, all I would see back then, and we're talking about like mid-'80s, or no, not 80s, mid-'70s, Indians, Asians, and just at 2 or 3, and me, 2 or 3 in the morning.
So it's like this dude with an afro.
Yeah, right, 'cause I still had hair then, right.
And the Indian
and
students
Asians.
and Asian students.
And I come in there, you know, they lit, and I probably could say, yeah, he smells like marijuana or whatever, you know, but I took to it. Where I began to really know I was good is when there was in a business course, there was a course called PO. There was a big course where it was taught in something called Zimmerman Auditorium. Zimmerman Auditorium held at that time 1,500 people. This was what a lot of folks would refer to as one of the flunk-out classes because it was computer coding, and they didn't really play around. You know, this was, I'd already been with the engineers. So by the time I had jumped in, and I'm kind of jumping over something, but I had changed majors. I had changed majors into the College of Business. With the engineers, it was I was in the College of Design, Art, and Architecture. But 1,500 folks in this auditorium. And the assignments, to most folks, were difficult assignments. man, I took to it like a sponge. I love that stuff. I would knock out I had a process where I would write the code, and back then, understand, this was before you had computers like your laptop and all of that. This was when you had computer cards. You know, they call them the computer decks. And so, you know, you on a key punch machine, key punch cards, you punch up the cards, you put them in the computer, or you give them to an operator. They would put them into a card reader, and you'd have to wait to get a green printout to see if your results was right or wrong. If they were wrong, you see all these syntax errors, and you see a syntax error, you say, damn, you know, I got to change one of the, whatever the key punch cards and put them back in again. What began to happen with me, I'd go, incidentally, they put your assignment up, they give you back your cards, and they give you back your green bar printout wrapped around the cards with the rubber band. And you'd get a ticket where you would know, okay, go to this cubicle. You know, it'd be like a bunch of like cubicles, like going like a little mailbox. Go to this open mailbox to pull out your cards and your printout. I would go back. I'd say, you know, and my cards and printout were missing. So I go to the operator, and he or she would say, well, let's just check. And they go in the back, and they come back. No, they put them up there. Somebody just must have accidentally taken your printout. Yeah. And so I did it again. You know, this happened about a week or so later. Same thing. I'm like, what? I don't know what's going on. So, you know, somebody, you know, so I started making copies of my deck. It happened so often, I'm going to say 6 or 7 times, son, that after a while, I simply just said, I'm going to make a copy of my key punch cards because this is happening so often. These operators are losing people's card decks. But it wasn't people. It was just me. An announcement was made at the Zimmerman Auditorium class. This was weeks into the curriculum, that they were investigating mass cheating in Zimmerman Auditorium. Mass cheating in this particular class. The professor was pissed too. He was upset. And he says, we'll be getting to the bottom of all of this very soon. And I'm thinking, I don't know what's going on. You know, I guess folks are having trouble. That same time when he announced that, one of the TAs came over to me, teachers' assistants, professors' assistants, and said, you know, he wants to meet with you, you know, because he said, we'll be talking to all the people that are involved in the cheating scandal, right? And so later on that day, it was like, you know, in the afternoon, 2 o'clock, you got to meet, you know, this is important, you know. And I still didn't know what was going on. I'm thinking, damn, I know what it is. The guy's been looking at my printouts, and he sees I know how to code. That I can code I'm going to be a TA. They're going to say, look, we want you to help others. You can be a TA like these upperclassmen. Because I wasn't even, you know, I'm like, 10th, I'm a sophomore. These guys were juniors and seniors. So I go and meet this professor. I go into the room with the professor. The TA that asked me to come in there, he's standing on one side of the professor, and this other TA is there. The professor's there, and he says to me, he says, have a seat, young man. This is Greg Frazier. He says, we know you're one of the people that's involved with this cheating scandal. I'm like, no, I've heard of it. You know, I was there when you talked about it. I'm not cheating. And so he slid over this printout, and one of the TAs said, you know about this code here? Son, they were showing me my code. My code had been duplicated. It was a fraternity doing that. And they had spread and shared. They were stealing my code and sharing it with, I guess, the rest of their fraternity brothers, and then obviously it would be shared by other people. Yeah. These guys started drilling me on my code, asking me questions. I was answering the questions because I knew the hell out of it. I was telling them about things I had read ahead of where they were. Not because I wanted to show off, it's because I was fascinated by that. Just the lack of a term. If there are any coders listening, when I talk about functions and subroutines, we weren't even up to functions and subroutines, but I was. And so I was even saying to these TAs and to the professor, this is something here. The way this is done right here, you can take this and make a function out of it. You could do this and do this in a subroutine. It'll save some coding time, you know. I backed him off. You know what he did? He said, I'm going to make you a TA. Bullshit, he didn't do that. He didn't even say, look, we're sorry we brought you in here. He didn't even say, man, we're impressed with what you know. Sorry we took up your time. He just said, we'll be in touch. Mm-hmm. I walked out of there. I'm thinking, man, that's kind of a letdown. They know I did this. They know I know how to code. He didn't even show any appreciation for my knowledge. This is when, in my opinion, another ancestor stepped into my world. Because as I was walking down those steps away from that building, at first I felt bad. Mm-hmm. But that was when it dawned on me, you just been complimented. Mm-hmm. Because you, to them, are a threat. Mm-hmm. That's why that professor didn't acknowledge anything that you said. That's why when you answered those guys as they were drilling you back and forth, and you just winged it and just did it and just answered their questions effortlessly. Mm-hmm. They didn't acknowledge anything. Now, probably them white boys were taking cues from the professor not to say anything. Yeah. But you already know you kicked ass. Mm-hmm. That's the value. You don't need any outside, any external confirmation of what you know. And if anything, it was the negative confirmation that tells you you're a bad dude because you are a threat to them. That threat not only to them, those three and that professor, but as a black man in America, you are a threat to this system. Now, understand, I just didn't come to that conclusion just on my own. I've been talking to other brothers, particularly older brothers, that were, and back then, that was just when the whole African studies was coming into play. So there was some brothers like, and you've heard me talk about Chuck, one of my best friends, and there was some other guys that were heavy into that. So I was beginning to get some of that. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, and especially when I talk to them guys, and it's, yeah, nigga, what you expect? You thought they were going to give you an award or something, And then begin to, this is like a confirmation of where I want to be, a confirmation, affirmation, whatever. So, that started me down this path of the way I think today.
So in this world of coding, because it's not just, it's unique to be a black man in that space, just a black person. But as I found just in some of the things I do with tech, it's a lot of lipstick on a pig out here. It's a lot of people that claim tech, that claim information technology when they're at best, they're just a middleman to somebody else. That happens very often.
That's true.
How have you navigated in this space, and how do you use that to your competitive advantage in your business?
And you and I, we've talked about this before, and it sort of evolved, or I became, even before I was aware of it, that a niche for me is a niche where I can provide a solution that's a mission-critical solution.
Explain what mission critical is.
Here's mission critical is something that is vital to the operation or the business or that enterprise in its functionality to the point where it might even where without that solution, the business it may not even be a going concern. The risk of it being a going concern could be affected, or at a minimum. Major loss in dollars, major loss in operations.
So give an example.
Yeah, I'll give you one real good example, an early one, without even getting into current clients. One of the first contracts we had, you remember the company that we started called MSC, was with at then it was called the Michigan Employment Securities Commission. The Michigan Employment Securities Commission, which had its a building over there on Grand River in Woodward. You know where that is? Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, you've had meetings over there with folks like Tony Adams and them. So, but back in the early '80s, when I started. Initially, I started with Jerry Sheppard, but eventually I went out on my own and we started this company called Management Systems Consultants, and the people that I worked with at that time, the first people that I met, and it was through a brother named Bill Johnson, who at that time wanted to be a partner at KPMG. He was on that track to be a partner, so he thought. And one of the major contracts that they had they being KPMG, the accounting firm, was to provide a system that would enable MESC, the Michigan Employment Securities Commission, the people that process unemployment checks, that issue unemployment checks and then process unemployment insurance payments from companies, to make their financial statements auditable. Put them in a position where you can audit their financial statements. Big company, big government entity like that had not. Arthur Andersen had developed a system in place for them. The system, it had a lot of issues with it, but one of the biggest issues was that the information was so reliable or unreliable that they couldn't come up with financial statements and get a clean opinion.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a clean opinion. They would get qualified opinions, or I think it was one year they got no opinion.
All right, so and then you got to explain this too, because you're getting into the weeds with accounting. So like a clean opinion on an audit, please explain that.
Yeah, a clean opinion, in effect, it's like the equivalent of saying the financial statements fairly present the financial position and the financial performance of whatever entity it is that you're auditing, where there no exceptions were found. That's what every company wants. Every company wants this clean opinion from an independent auditor, like a KPMG or an Arthur Andersen or a Deloitte or a PricewaterhouseCoopers. That's really that's the major moneymaker for these accounting firms, to be able to go in and state some kind of opinion, all right? And it's a sad day when companies that rely on getting a clean opinion get something called an exception, where there's some exceptions. Those exceptions may be due to, basically usually bad internal controls, or just the information is just unreliable. It doesn't add up. The balance sheet information doesn't make sense. You said you made X dollars, but we have evidence that you didn't make X dollars, right? So a clean opinion is where no exceptions are found. An exception would be the things that I'm talking about that would indicate that there's some weaknesses that merit disparities or anomalies in your financial statements. And then an adverse opinion, which is really like, hey, we can't even audit this. This is bad. We're not even going to touch it. MESC couldn't get clean opinions until we put this system in place. We being the folks that developed the system. Developed the system.
I'm just moving the mic up.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I can move it back and forth.
That's cool.
The folks that developed so KPMG brought in. I was one of the developers, and with some other folks. To cut to the chase, like you just said, it's people that hold themselves out to be coders, can't code worth a damn. They may know how to code, the fundamental stuff.
Bit, yeah.
But coding is more than just being the nerd that codes. Coding is you got to have a vision to know what the solution is going to be. Coding is where you got to be able to look at a problem, listen to people articulate what the problem is, look at the results, and be able to envision how to come up with a solution. And then if you know how to write the code to do it, yeah, that's the trifecta. You are the Michael Jordan. And that's what I remember a Filipino company that I did business with for years in Chicago. Minda, she said, to her folks, yeah, he's the Michael Jordan of coding. But so we came up with a system. The first where the KPMG people began to pay attention to me was this was a very political environment, MESC. Well, of course, being in Detroit and dealing with unemployment, and so. The IT people at MESC didn't want KPMG to have anything to do with their systems. They didn't want to provide computers or terminal. Back there would be terminals. They didn't want to have terminal access to their mainframe computers where we could begin to code and write tests and do tests and things like write the code and test our systems and all that. And they were under a lot of pressure. I remember the partner in charge, who was actually a brother at that time. The brother's name was Eddie Munson. The partner in charge at KPMG came to see how we were doing because he had got word that, hey, we've got some challenges here. Personal computers were just coming into their own back then. Turns out there was a software called Realia that basically you could install this software you could install what we would call mainframe computer software, which is written in COBOL. You could install that on these microcomputers, and you could unit test. And I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds with this, but basically, you could do all the coding on these
on a PC,
and then we upload it to the mainframe. I found out I did all the research and found that out, and then started doing it. And then, they paid for it. KPMG ate it up, right? We came out, anyway, to cut to the chase, that same, that following year, they got their first audited financial statements. And I was wrong. They couldn't even get audited financial statements prior to that. They got audited financial statements, but not a clean opinion. They got exceptions, right? But that was a start. Later on, of course, they improved. Where that's an example of not something that would shut down MESC, but it would have been a major scandal had that not been pulled off, right? Had we failed at that.
Yeah.
And when I say we, I'm talking about me. I'm the one that did the code. Let me put it this way. There's coding that you can do. That's basic rudimentary stuff. You're not going to do all. I was the coder. I was the lead guy. I was the one that visualized it, explained it to other folks. So here I am, this brother that was from South Avondale, poor part of Avondale. I want to stay close to the mic, I guess. But talking to these folks from Notre Dame and places like that, because they couldn't code and they couldn't visualize. They couldn't see, right? All of that is my philosophy about how our ancestors also flow through us. All we're doing and what I'm doing, I'm not a genius or anything. I'm simply remembering our past. Now, I know I'm getting kind of philosophical here, but there's nothing new under the sun here. Everything that we do, like with coding and all of that, we've done before in prior civilizations, man. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to see, but the black man and woman, we've been on this planet for like millennia. So all of this is simply remembering what we already knew.
So at that brings us to what we're talking about today, the NFTs. And shout out to my friend Mike Willingham. That was one of the first people kind of talking about it in the space. And I was thinking to myself, Detroit is Different was kind of one of the first on the scene with podcasting. Now we're venturing into this community group. We're starting a nonprofit. And within it, when I spoke to Mike, I was like, what's the deal with these NFTs? And this is like maybe a discussion, months ago. And then he was like, well, I know it's on the Ethereum platform. And then we were talking a little bit more, and it's kind of like smart contracts. And I'm like, I know my dad does a lot on smart contracts because I videotaped him giving presentations to the MICPA on what smart contracts are, and back to auditing, continuous audits and things like that. So if NFTs deal with and are built upon Ethereum, I'm sure my dad can help with the NFT. And then my own research into it, it's like a non-fungible token. So that non-fungible token can't be broken down and it's only one. I said, I want to make this different. I want to make one NFT be shared amongst many people, which is kind of against the grain, but I'm always thinking like, what could be different? How do we go against the grain? And that's where I get on the phone with you. I present the idea to you. You're like, I don't know. This NFT thing could just be some, it could be the hype beast. It could be something serious. What's your idea? And I'm like, I want to sell a Detroit is Different NFT and kind of capitalize from the social, it would use the social capital that Detroit is Different has built and put it in the space of NFTs. That is my idea. That's the concept. And then you were like, okay, let me look a little more into this. You looked a little bit more into this. Now you got a presentation today.
Okay. All right. And that's a great synopsis, son. And let's understand where we're at. NFTs, not all this is so new.
Yeah.
We're all still learning about NFTs. I'm still learning as we go. But it is fascinating to me. And as you pointed out, what an NFT is, a non-fungible token. And man, where do we start? I mean, I don't know. Basically, that non-fungible token is subject to the same infrastructure as Bitcoin, And that is what makes it a non-fungible, means that you can't change it. You can't, a better way to say that is it's not, you can't interchange it, you can't manipulate it. It's like once that token is created, it's out there. You can't delete it, you can't modify it, you can't, it's there. And the reason it's out there is because it's replicated thousands and thousands of times on the blockchain.
Amongst the blockchain. And let me add this too for people. So, because I know how my dad is, and you can see he loves this, and you see he's good at coding. I want to give it to people how I think it's going to impact them a little bit more and hit them in the gut. So if a person's asking what's the value of an NFT, first off, if you go out and buy an NFT, don't think that you're about to become a billionaire. Right. There's no such thing as getting rich quick, even with the whole concept of Bitcoin. And I was one of the first people to introduce to my dad, hey, have you thought about this Bitcoin? And years ago, I don't even know if you remember this now, but we were listening together, going to the DAC where you have a membership, listening to a Joe Rogan podcast on NFTs. And this may have been like 7 years ago. And you were like, I don't know anything about that. Then you were like, yeah, I'm looking a little bit more into this NFT thing.
It was NFTs then, or was it
Bitcoin? Oh, it was the Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
Looking a little bit more into this Bitcoin. And it's like, I'm going to do a MICPA presentation on Bitcoin and what this means. So a lot of this kind of deals with, there are challenges in the central banking system. Right. If traditionally, as we know, where we have fiat currency is connected to the central banking system, meaning that the Federal Reserve, right now we know interest rates have been flat for forever, and we see inflation on houses and many other things, and things talked about it's set through the Fed. Now, I feel like I'm in an econ class right now talking to people, but this Fed, the Federal Reserve that sets interest rates and decides the circulation of American currency, which impacts the world currency because most of the world trades, quote unquote, in their stock markets upon American currency. And this can fluctuate depending upon where interest rates lie, or the gross domestic product. I know this is econ class, but we're two Walsh guys, business people. This matters to you because a centralized banking, basically the government, which it really ain't even the government, but an outside entity can control how cash influxes and flows and how much is in circulation. Upon the blockchain and through Bitcoin and many other cryptocurrencies, instead of a centralized bank, it is a collection of computer servers or people that open up their computer servers to agree upon how transactions are flowing. So instead of, and I'm sure, I don't know if any of you all have ever sold a house or something like that, and you get a check for let's say $100,000. You get a check for something like that. You put it in the bank. It may take 2 weeks for that to clear. If you sold a house through the blockchain with Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, you got your money right then and there because nobody's checking the transaction. Nobody's looking. Nobody's reviewing. The people that are reviewing is this collection of servers that have bought into what this is. Now, the blockchain, for what people, this is a very short example. It's just like a ledger, or how you may keep for anybody old enough. If you have a checkbook, you got to know what's in your bank, what's outside your bank. That's what the blockchain technically is. But the check and balance on the blockchain is that you have so many people verifying what that transaction is of what went in and also what went out. So it would be almost as if the whole neighborhood had a penny jar. We knew it always had 100 pennies. Kari took out 2 pennies today, and my whole neighborhood, all 100 people on my block saw me take the 2 pennies. So now they know that I have these 2 pennies ready, and they know that I'm going to take these 2 pennies and go put it in Greg Frazier's penny jar. So now those same 100 people would verify that those 2 pennies went from me to Greg Frazier. And then this is also the unique thing about the blockchain. It follows all these transactions. It opens up and gives freedom for us to spend and engage in currency. And we know just right now through so many of these banking systems, what can happen, what can freeze your account, what could control what you could do. I mean, God forbid, knock on wood, you end up in any legal troubles and you got money in the bank, you ain't got money in the bank. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You end up in some legal troubles and you end up in Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, The government's still trying to figure out how they can control things like that. What would happen? You know, if you make that purchase for that house or that transaction, because let's say you sell your house and now you're in a new city and you need access to some of that capital immediately for whatever move you're going to make, you may still be waiting that 14 days. You made that crypto sale, you wouldn't have to do that. So it becomes through the collection of all these other computers and many of the other users, it verifies. It's a collective yes and a collective understanding of what is, as opposed to, like we say, the Fed is not even a government agency. This is an independent entity that the government trusts to control the funding and the bank, the cash circulation and the interest rates of the United States of America. That is what the Fed is. Cryptocurrency can collapse not just that here in America, but throughout all markets across the world. And then in certain places across the world, as we know in Africa, you know, it's already, you know, more fluid. Because, as we know, world banking, the International Monetary Fund, but i.e. white supremacy, has already looked to corrupt it, which has made other nations like Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, Libya, way more open to using this. And not just in those African countries, in all of the countries. Every country that has been oppressed through international banking, and you can tie any international banking back to colonialism, mm-hmm. It's hopping right on top of a lot of this. Now, the Ethereum platform is a little bit different than just the Bitcoin blockchain, because the Bitcoin is just specific to what the Bitcoin blockchain is specific to what can be sold and transacted through Bitcoin. Ethereum opens up for smart contracts or whatever. It's basically just tracking whatever that ledger transaction is. And that's what can be valuable about what an NFT is. So when I say that you're not going to become a millionaire off NFTs, you need to be choosy about how you select your NFTs. It's like collecting art. You know, you hear that it's value in here's a classic one, and I'm sure the art community probably wants to smack me in the face, but I look at a lot of Basquiat paintings and I think it looks like Scribble Scrabble personally to me. So if I were to buy a Basquiat painting under the premise of, you know, it's worth millions of dollars and Jay-Z appraised this, or Jay-Z's appraiser appraised it, and I buy it, and then I find out that it's only worth, I can only sell it for $5, I'll be mad as hell. So if I buy a painting and I buy some art, yeah, I want it to be worth a lot in the appraisal market, but I also want it to be something good that I can look at. And that's how you need to be thinking about buying NFTs too. So with that kind of short soliloquy and monologue, I pass it back to you.
Right. Yeah, that is, you know, there's so many things you just said that I want to just kind of echo.
Okay.
First of all, to me, in my opinion, the feds, they're not independent. They're basically controlled by the U.S. government. They're basically controlled by, I'll extend it to even say, they basically are controlled by the Eurocentric establishment. Right?
Well, when I say that the Fed is not, when I say it's not a part of the government, I'm going through the lens of it's not democratic.
Right.
Meaning that we're not appointing who's in those positions.
Not directly.
But we're not,
but
we appoint those that select.
The president can, I think, can't they remove the...
Yeah, the chairman of the Fed, but also who are those boardmen of the Fed, kind of have a free reign and sit in those posts for, 10 years. And when I say free reign, meaning that it's not in the same vein of like right now on the crux of what I feel like is happening in an international or a national crisis of what's happening with the way cash flow is in America right now. Yeah. Someone will be held way more accountable, as we saw in 2008, if these were people we had to vote for. But they're once removed. So we blame George W. Bush or Barack Obama for what Ben Bernanke or here's the classic one, too big to fail. And, they got us in the problem. We got you in this problem, so we're the best people to get you out of this problem. Yeah. That's not the type of shit that a politician can say. That's not even something that, you know what I'm saying, you can stand on. But like a Ben Bernanke or a Alan Greenspan can say something like that because they know, in reality, at best, I'm dealing with, I would say that, Jamie Dimon has more control and influence of the Fed than Joe Biden does.
Right.
And that's why I say it's not us, because the corporations that run these banks and the purse strings of how the money is released to these banks. So, and man, I didn't think I'd go on this economic soliloquy, but basically a bank makes money in the same concept of, like, I guess, loan sharking. A bank makes money off of loaning money, and then they gather that money through the interest rates. Yeah. That's the on paper version of what a bank can do.
We're talking about loan shark. The term would be the VIG.
Yeah.
They make money off of. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right.
So to have a bank in America, you technically, hence the FDIC and what happened with the original crash of, the stock market crash. Well, my other grandmother said, shit, I don't remember the Great Depression because we was already poor. Right. But at that point in time, it's like the FDIC will insure up to $200,000 into this transaction. But to insure that money in that $200,000, you have to have a relationship and be established as a bank within this system to lend money and all of this. Cryptocurrency supersedes all of that.
Right.
It's no, Jamie Dimon does not have any more access to blockchain than you do.
Yeah.
If you decide to buy right now. So even if Chase goes in and says, we want to buy $400 million worth of cryptocurrency, and you decide to buy $1 worth of cryptocurrency, it's the same influence. Whereas we already know that if Chase Bank wants to do something, I'm sure that the Fed will allow for Chase or Bank of America or any of these banks around here that have ties to colonialism. Let's be clear about that. Ties to colonialism. They have more access to this. And that's why I say the Fed is operating outside of the government accountability system of the lens of democracy. But, here we go.
Good point. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm with you. So, yeah, if you think about fiat currency right now.
Yeah.
Fiat currency has no intrinsic value. Mm-hmm. The only value that fiat currency has is whatever value the perceptions of folk think it has. And most perceptions of people that trust fiat currency, when we take fiat, we're talking about the dollar bill,
yes,
peso and all that, but we'll say the dollar bill. That perception is basically propped up by government willing to step in and prop up that currency when it's hurting. And one of the reasons it hurts is because you basically have a centralized monetary system with these third parties, these middlemen that try and control the flow and the value of that dollar. And what we're beginning to see is they're effing lousy at it.
And at one point in time, as many people say, because I'm sure it's people saying like, that's why you just be. So at one point in time, it was the gold standard. $1 you could trade in for a certain amount of gold. But now I would go as far as to say that the value of $1 is kind of based upon the debt that you can incur. Hence, the value of cash itself, when we talk about capitalism, is the liquidity of it. Meaning that I can have this dollar bill, and that dollar bill can now be transferred into X amount of value. And this what shows the instability right now of $1 because prices, hence the inflation of it. Prices are so all over the place. If a person says that t-shirt costs $600, somebody may say, oh man, it's beyond too much expensive. And another person may say, all right, I guess that's a $600 shirt. Whereas, if you had the gold standard and you could still quantify things, but even gold's value at one point in time was the liquidity of it, because if gold no longer has liquid value, it's the same thing. If the old adage or the scenario I always give is if all power goes out, and nothing is happening, and a person's walking down the street with 7 gallons of water, and I have $3,000 worth of money cash in my hand. How valuable are those 7 gallons of water?
Right.
To me, it's $3,000 worth value.
Easily.
Because at this point in time, with I don't know what's happening in the world, that water has now re-quantified the value. But if a person still holds the value of the cash, now you're walking up to the guy with the 7 gallons of water like, I'll give you $20 for it, $40 for it, and you're negotiating. But it's still the perceived, agreed upon value.
That's right. Yeah, that you nailed it right there. Perceived, agreed upon value. And I like your point that what makes the dollar still a dominant currency, although it's waning, is its liquidity.
And then also in international markets. So, and rest in peace to Muammar Gaddafi. And I believe that this is what led to his assassination, is the fact that he was looking to not just, and then even the quality of life of Libyans. Most people don't know this. If you were a Libyan, you were given the right to housing, education, healthcare, many things. Libya had a very stable society through what was happening with a lot of the oil trade, and we know the greed connected to that. But he was going beyond what Libya was, and he was looking to create the Afro, which would have been an African dollar to trade amongst, I want to say, a lot of Northern Africa and some of Central Africa, maybe some of West Africa. That would have transitioned, because if you go into most of these other countries, the standard of how they use currency and liquidity is based on the American dollar. And as more countries wane and move away from that, that also lowers the American dollar, because now I can no longer go to Panama or Nigeria or Britain or Germany or whatever and have $100 and say, give me some of this. It'd be like a person from Senegal coming here with a Senegalese $1 million and it's like, hey, let me get that shirt. You'd be like, can't do nothing for you, man.
And unlike Gaddafi, and what Western powers did to Gaddafi, they can't bomb the blockchain.
No.
And if there was a way for them to, they would. So since they can't physically bomb the blockchain, what the Jamie Dimons and the Buffetts of the world are doing is they try to dog it every chance they can.
Yep.
You will never hear Jamie Dimon or William Buffett or any of those folks say anything good about the blockchain or Bitcoin or smart contracts, because it's scaring them to death. And it should, because that's one of the components. And it's so interesting that how this evolution has led to all of these things now that we see as progress are actually things on the long run that are going to hurt Western powers, because decentralized monetary systems means that guy is, when things are in place, the guy that's over there that's a Somalian pirate, if he has access and knows how to use the blockchain, he can trade currency with the person that's in Argentina that's doing things, skipping all around the centralized monetary system. That scares the hell out of people. You talked about it from a macro level and how it affects countries, how a centralized system impedes and restricts that flow. It also impedes and restricts individuals. That's what's powerful about what we're going to talk about here, because that same bank, and you probably pointed this out, can decide that no, this particular debit card transaction is not going to go through.
Yeah, we flag this.
Right.
And we may, and you've probably dealt with that. We've all probably dealt with that. If you're, we black in Detroit. I mean, our ATM machine, as I told one of those people at Chase, my ATM machine goes off at 6:00. So God forbid if I want to get cash after 6:00. So are there certain barriers like that? It's been many times you put a check in for, I don't know, it was a recent transaction at just $700. And I'm like, that's not even that much. But they held that transaction for 10 business days.
Yeah.
And I know that things like that are systemic racism. Yeah.
And because of the central control. That doesn't happen here. And not only does it happen here, what we're about to talk about, what's fascinating about NFTs, is it's a way to actually do what the dollar has done by taking something that's an intangible, that in and of itself has no value, but you actually build the value of that intangible based on the perceptions of the people that are participating in the transactions and support of that intangible. That intangible now being an NFT.
Yep.
The NFT could be a picture of a dog bone, and you decide to upload that picture of a dog bone to a decentralized storage system that is connected to or interconnected to a blockchain. That would be the example of what they call the OpenSea marketplace and other marketplaces like that. That's where they've got marketplaces like this. The classic LeBron James and the NBA is tapped into NFTs.
Big time.
Well, those NFTs, by way of a token, are connected to the blockchain where the ownership of, and all it is again, perceptions of people saying, oh, the person that owns this particular dunk by LeBron James is this person here, based on the fact that this dunk is associated with this token connected to the public key of this guy named Joe Blow.
Yep.
Right? And so Joe Blow owns this dunk. Now, can somebody else say, well, man, I can see the same thing on YouTube? Yep. It's still about perceptions. That's the equivalent of when you brought up the idea with the horrible art. Yeah. It's like, this art over here, this art is just a white canvas with a black dot on it. Yep. You say, well, wait a minute. That looks like that spot that's on my bathroom wall. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but that ain't not recognized.
Or here's the classic one. You and I have both seen the Mona Lisa, and we have never been to the Louvre. Yeah. And we're smart enough to recognize that if we own the Mona Lisa, it would be worth what art collectors say is millions of dollars or God knows what. But we can still see the picture of it. Yeah, yeah. But the Louvre has the possession of the actual quote-unquote art.
That's right. That's right. So what we're talking about here is basically using the construct of NFTs to literally create value in our community. That's really what excites me about the potential here. Is to literally be able to say, and I love the concept that and I'm glad we stuck with it, the concept that you said, hey, no, let's just have one NFT, but have multiple ownerships of that. Because the multiple ownerships ensures that you have community buy-in. And that community buy-in is our opportunity to educate young people, old people. We're going to do the same thing with NFTs and blockchain, training people on how to set up their own public key and private key. Same similar process that we went through with, I don't know, you recall Detroit drums. Yeah. When drums came out, when that whole social, this was before Facebook. Yeah. That whole social networking effort was with Theo Broughton and them, where we had training sessions up there on Livernois and
Livernois and like Linden. It was like
where the Happy Pizza places. I think it's still Happy Pizzas there. But before it was Happy Pizza, that was a little area where people, if they wanted to work on computers that they didn't have in the home, they could go there. Yeah. We had training sessions on how to use drums, and so a whole population of Detroiters began to learn how to use a computer so they could access drums.
So drums. So for people that let's say that drums was a message board that was started and founded through my dad. Now this was I would say maybe about 20 years ago, and this drums grew to a point where I definitely think it led to the Fire Jerry Oliver movement. Yep. It definitely led to the probably Freeman Hendricks not being elected mayor movement. I
think it discouraged Archer from running for mayor. He only ran for mayor one term, primarily because of the information going through drums was not going through mainstream media, and people began to just focus on drums after a while. It was called DetroitDrums.com.
Detroit Drums was a message board. So if you're familiar with the message board, you make a post and people can comment on that post. But it had
you could add photos. Yep. You could do all this stuff. Yeah, man.
Yeah, and it had some what do you call that? Like some admin. Because anything on the internet. Oh, yeah. But this was like pre-spamming to
That's
today.
Right. This was pre-Facebook.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Now I know we've been talking about. You want to stop?
No, continue.
So by training our folks, by teaching them how to get their own public key and private key, and then teaching them how to purchase some ether right? And you can get Ether. I mean, minimum
Ethereum.
$5. Ethereum. Yeah. Well, Ethereum is the actual platform.
Yep. And Ether is what?
The equivalent of the Bitcoin. They call it Ether. And then there's something called gas, and it's all based on But by doing that, it enables them to then say, what if we have a smart contract that a token is connected to, and that token is connected to, and I use the term totem because I thought about this. If we come up with a colorful, when you come up with whatever that totem, whatever that visual is going to be, and that's all it really is. It's the shiny object that people look to and connect to, much like our ancestors would connect to a totem if we were in a village in Africa. That totem becomes a centerpiece of the connectivity of the village. That's why when people would come in and take over, when other villagers, other warriors would come in and take over an African village, or if Europeans came in, they say one of the ways we can get control of the hearts and minds of these folks is if we can get this totem. If we get that totem, then we're the king, right? We're talking about establishing a totem. You can't just go in and grab that totem because, of course, the totem is replicated. All that's because of the blockchain, right? If we have a way where people can buy, we'll call it 1 share or 2 shares, let's say $3 to $2 or $5 a pop, let's say, and what they're really buying into is the ability to determine the disposition or destination of that totem, of that visual, of that whatever that's going to be. And I always think of something, visual, something beautiful they can look at. They can go out and see that visual on the OpenSea platform and see the token associated with it and know that through the smart contract, that token is associated with all these shares that all these folks have. And in order to participate in that, I was saying you could have it, and these are just my speculation. We could talk, and you could talk to other folks, see how they want to do it. But for a person to be listed as a member, a family member, or a shareholder of that token, they'd have to be voted in. And maybe there's criteria that folks will come up with. You got to be a Detroiter. You got to be someone that's local, But basically, you got to be voted in by a consensus of the people that are already in that as shareholders connected to that one public key associated with that token.
Now, let me expand on how this values for not just Detroit is different, but this is going to be a gateway as we work this out. And I'm sure many of my other cohorts in community organizing will want this because it now re-quantifies our social capital. So now when Rocket Mortgage wants to expand what happens with the Q line and they want to gather some social capital, it'd be like, wow, it'd be great to get into this Linwood and Davison token over NFT over here. How do we get that? And it's like, well, you're gonna have to get voted in through that collection of those community members.
And now we voted in.
And now it's up to the value that we quantify. So it could be dollars. It could be, all right, you're going to put a rec center over here in the neighborhood. It could be whatever, rented into the smart contract through Ethereum, and the transaction would not be completed until our demands are met in the community. So it quantifies that social capital just by honoring who we are. And now it can put value points on whatever we want with that.
Right. And what happens is once brothers and sisters begin to see how that works, where they say, and I use this example, and because I'm using Sister Queen Mother Watson as an example. That's why I have down here the House of Watson family.
Yep.
So the House of Watson family,
and they're gonna be looking now as you're talking. They'll be looking at this.
Oh yeah, because we don't have. I don't think you have a visual for it.
Well, we have it on paper, but it'll be up on the screen when.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, cool. It'll be up on the screen.
Yep.
So you have. So the House of Watson family, and we're not just talking about just members of Watson. We're talking about people that the collective shareholders decide to vote into those shareholders. And when they say these are the shareholders that actually control the release of that NFT to anybody, right? And there may be certain circumstances where an NFT, based on whatever the collective decides is a consensus, because a consensus could be listed as 85%, right? A consensus might be 90%. if you don't get a 90% consensus, then whatever Rock Financial wants to do or whatever, it's just not going to happen because you didn't get a consensus. Some might say, and they may say, well, depending upon the purpose of this collective, they may have it as low as majority rule. Yeah. But some tokens, some totems may be sacred. This is one we never want to touch. So you've got to have it at, say it's a 85% consensus for everybody to agree to sell this totem, or 90% consensus, and it stays 90%. And all this we can control in a smart contract. Yeah. And it only drops down to something less than that every 5 years. And then there's only for a small window of time. And when that vote can take place, then it bounces back up to 95%. Now, that said, one of the restrictions of a smart contract, once we put that code in place, we can't change it.
And that's also kind of through the blockchain. It's locked in. You can't manipulate it. It can't be broken even if the FBI and the CIA step in and say, change this. It'd be like,
right.
Can't change it.
Can't change it.
You can't change it. Yeah. You know, and that's the beauty of this. So I know we spoke briefly, but what's your vision for how will you go about coding this Detroit is Different token NFT? And I'm going to have my friend Mike design it. And it was good. Like, as I say, this whole month has been about the fundraising effort of the community group, the Detroit is Different 501c3. So it's like I spoke on this first, and then I introduced and interviewed Mike and showed you some of his jewelry designs, everybody in Detroit is Different world. And then Baba Malik came on as the original guest. Now you have my dad, and today is my birthday. So make sure you give to Detroit is Different today. $, Detroit 501c3. Give above $250 to buy into this NFT. But speak a little bit too. How will you design this? Detroit is Different. Yeah. Like how is that going to look? Because this is different than even the regular NFT.
Yeah, and understand everything we're talking about now, son. This is, you know how you have something called a proof of concept, and then you actually have eventually the pilot, and then the code. Yep. We're just in concept right now. Mm-hmm. So the way I see it is when I get into the whole proof of concept, that's going to be the next step where I actually start playing around with the code, because I haven't written the code for Ethereum is called Solidity. I haven't written any Solidity. I've looked at it. Mm-hmm. I looked at it, and it's a lot like what I code with when I'm putting up solutions for clients, you know. But the way I see it, and that's what I kind of outlined here with this illustration, is although you see 4 boxes here that represent the smart contract app, it's all going to be one smart contract app. It's going to have multiple functions. There's going to be, I think I'm answering your question, a function. Here's the function that puts out an announcement of a timeline to vote in some prospective members. Mm-hmm. And you've got until this date to this date to vote. And if we reach a consensus based on the participants, then these folks can get in or they won't get in. If they're allowed, given an opportunity to get in, then they'll have to pay their ether. Whatever, and this is all about consensus too. I'm just saying this. Mm-hmm. Whatever the going rate for that ether is, whatever the equivalent of if it was $5 when we first started, now it's $15. You got to pay $15. But the family may say, no. If you come in this way, you pay $5. Mm-hmm. If you're in Detroit, if you're a Detroiter, you only pay $5. How do we know they're Detroiters? Well, that's something for, again, the family to work out. The consensus has to work that out. How you define those rules. But if you reflect those rules, I'm not coding any of that. That's just a matter of people saying, no, we found out they're not even, these folks live in Nevada, right? Mm-hmm. They're a front company, you know. So we know, no, we're just not gonna vote them in, right? So the coding part of that is just simply enabling people within a specified time frame to vote. Now, whether or not you want to have 1 vote per share or 1 vote per person, that's something that the consensus, before we even start coding, we may come to an agreement that, say, for this particular totem, and that could vary from totem to totem. Yeah, this totem is going to be one vote per share. This one over here might be 1 vote per person. right? So that's kind of the front end functionality. How do people get in there and become shareholders, right? When you say, what if we want to? Now we're ready to. It's like Rock Financial comes in and they do say, hey, we see that this totem on open seas, we see that, hey, we can gain some influence using Rock Financial. Yeah, if Rock Financial is good, we want to do something on Livernois and whatever. And one of the ways to get some goodwill is to basically purchase this totem. Buy into the totem, right?
Yep.
We know we can't be voted in because we're not Detroiters, right?
Yep.
But they're saying it'll show some good faith if you support our totem, if you make a purchase of our totem.
Yeah.
And you can go out and see that totem, right? And so that would also be voted on as well. It's like, okay, based on the pricing, you're saying, oh, well, the going rate for something like this is X dollars. No, the going rate is going to be to whatever the consensus says.
Yeah, and it could be the rec center, it could be the money, it could be whatever the community so forth says. It could be, pay for, buy roofs for every, we need new roofs on this whole row of houses or something. Like, it's whatever the community consensus comes to. That will not be written in the code as much as you just know that these are the times for the votes and the consensus, and that's when things could change.
And we could put some contingencies in there. Because once we're outside of the smart contract, if the parties like the Rock Financials of the world decide to play a game, yeah, we told you that we would do the school thing, but that's not working out. There may be some contingencies there. Maybe the totem or the token isn't released directly to them.
Yeah,
it's released to an escrow account. And that it stays in that escrow account for like a few years, right? And depending upon how y'all go, then we will bring that escrow. We'll bring that totem back in, right? And all of that could be reflected in those contracts, right? In the written contracts, but in a smart contract, we make it pretty plain and clear. If these terms aren't met, and then how do we control whether those terms are met? By the way people vote.
Yep. And
so we're literally creating value from ether, I guess, from nothing, right?
And the value is the social capital and the consensus.
The social capital. That's
the consensus of these people. Hence, the people. Like I always say, our value is in social capital, because and I say that, but the extension is, we gather our social capital based on our character, our talent, and our skill sets. Because if you lack that, then to our society, you aren't going to be seen and deemed with value.
As we remember, as a people, as we wake up, we have been taught that our value is based on tangible stuff. Like, this is one of the, I'm guilty of this like everybody else, because even brothers and sisters that, hey, it's all about land. We got to get land. It's about material stuff. Our value, what the Creator's blessed in us, is our creativity, our vision, all these gifts we have as a people, collectively and individually. And all of those things, our vision, our creativity, our ability to, the way we communicate, our connection and rhythm with the universe, creates a synergy that gives us all this energy. When we tap into that, when we don't tap into that, that's when we don't seem to have the energy to do what we need to do. We're waking up to that now. The people that have oppressed us all these years, they've always known that. And they see that we're waking up. That's why you see all this crazy stuff happening in the government right now. What we're doing right here, we're going to tap into that consciousness. And particularly, I want young people, if we do this and set it up as we do this, young people will begin to understand this. We create our value. We create our value. We are the source of all supply for us. And that's what we're beginning to learn. When you think about our evidence of our connection to the universe, and I know I'm getting, again, esoteric and all of that, but this all ties in. I know it's hard for people to see, but we'll see someday. If not us, our grandchildren will. It's connected in such a way, evidence of that would be the equivalent of those giant kale trees that Brother Yukini and his family grew in December. I don't know if you saw those photos on Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean, kale trees. That's because our ancestors in nature and us, when we vibrate at that level, nature is waiting on us with that. The way I'm speaking right now, I'm tapping into my abilities as a coder. People say, "Oh, hey, this brother's a genius. He could be a genius." That's nothing. This is just a vibration that I was blessed to connect into through our ancestors and the Creator that allows this. But we see evidence of that all the time. You are evidence of what's happening here. And the ability of us to communicate and see this vision and we see it from one perspective, and we're going to bring it into reality. That is our source of value. That is our source of wealth.
That's great. I'm going to close it there. Thank you so much for breaking this down. We're going to definitely get you back eventually, and we'll tell more of the story because there's other cool stories. I want to do a whole series with my dad coming up sometime next year and other things because as you see, when people think business and economics, I have a niche for this too. I hope we didn't go too much over your head, but some of this stuff we got to get a little over your head to introduce to you. But like we say, thank you so much. Thanks for giving to Detroit is Different. The community group is starting. A lot of this is possible through my social network of you, my friend Mike, Youssef, Baba Malik. Like this month is a classic example of Black men, a part of my life I look to that I can bounce things off of and make sure you have that rich circle because it is through our talent and our creativity that most of this can come. Remember, give to December 30th. $ Detroit is, wait, I'm messing up. $ or as I say, cash tag, as they say, Detroit 501c3. Thank you so much, Dad.
Oh, you're welcome, son.
And then I don't know if you want to give contact information or whatever, but I'll stop it right here with my dad.
Right.
Most of my dad's clients, as you can see, are like, you have to be in a world of trouble. So if you probably need my dad, you will find out how to get to my dad.
You'll find out. Right.
Yep. Peace.
All right, brother. Thank you.
What up, dope? Black Detroit. It's Youssef Bunchy Shakur from Zone 8, Detroit. Revolutionary, activist, organizer. Coming today with you, we have 2021, the state of Black Detroit. Detroit is different at the Mama Cool House, December 30th, 2021 at noon. We come and have a conversation about leadership, housing, education, justice, economics, access to opportunities, legacy. Black Detroit, what does that mean? Evaluating ourselves, evaluating our history. How do we change this course? Critically looking at our past to determine our present and our future. Peace. See you there. Black Detroit.